Hi, Adrianne. Welcome to Awaken and Align. How are you doing?
I'm hanging in there. I'm hanging in there. It's an intense time to be alive, right?
Yes. Well, for our listeners, Adrianne found me on Instagram. Love Instagram. And I led a meditation for her and her circle of activists last night. And it was pretty powerful. I feel like a lot of these meditations, if you go deep, are uncomfortable. And I feel like we might have felt a little bit of discomfort, but I feel that your activist ladies were open for it. So thank you for inviting me in. And I find it ironic that your platform is called I Will Not Be Quiet. And some of the ladies were expressing that they felt like their throat chakras were blocked, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think we need a lot of healing around that right now because we are being forced to speak our truths and be more authentic in our voice. So, thank you for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's my pleasure. I think that as important as it is to speak out and share your truth, it's also important to ensure that you're finding that quiet time to listen to the voices that haven't yet left your mouth,
Mhm.
but continues to ring true. Um, you feel it in your bones. And so I so deeply appreciated having that space and that energy. We often think about our energy and how we can transform it into action, as opposed to, how do we turn that energy to understand our own selves and how we're feeling in this moment.
Yeah, exactly. Well, just so I get to know you a little better, where are you from?
I'm from Hawaii.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
paradise.
I am from Honolulu, and my parents. A little life story. I was born in Texas, and my parents separated when I was 9. I moved to Honolulu with my dad and lived there for about 8 years, and then my parents fell back in love,
Ah,
and they moved back to Texas. And um, that was one thing that they always told me, that timing is everything. So when I consider home is Honolulu, but home base for my family is Texas.
hmm. And when did you move to New York?
Oh boy, about 15 years ago.
Wow.
It's been
So
a it's
New
been a
York.
while. Yeah, and it's hard for me to think about going anywhere else. I
Mhm.
love the energy here. I love the love here. I feel my most comfortable self, in this crazy city of ours, but it brings me so much comfort.
Yeah. So you have a regular job, and I say that in air quotes because I don't know. I feel like our whole idea of jobs and how we make money is evolving so much now. And you have an organization called I Will Not Be Quiet. Can you talk about both and what
Yeah.
you do?
Yeah, so my full-time job is called Rosie, and we're a storytelling agency for nonprofits, people, and brands doing good in the world. And so the name Rosie is kind of paying homage to the long line of human rights activists of my family, all female, and
Wow.
all
Yes.
of that variations of the name Rosie, Rosalinda, Rosalind, Rose, and but it's also a mindset. It's thinking through issues with rose-tinted glasses. Often we are so overwhelmed by bad news and what's going on, and it's hard for us to think about how we can be the change that we want to see in the world. And so when you're overwhelmed with this, when you're in this kind of cycle of fear, we do the worst thing. We turn off and we say, we can't look at that anymore. It's too much. What Rosie does is that we focus on the people who have been doing the work all along, the unsung heroes, and shining a light on the work that they're doing. And the more that we can see solutions and the people behind the scenes, the more that we can see um, what a solution could look like and what our role is in it, and how we can kind of play that to its advantage. So that's Rosie in itself. We work with organizations like the Time's Up campaign and She Should Run. I Will Not Be Quiet is a women's activism group that I started with my best friend 3 years ago. And we bring women together in intimate talking circles to learn about policy, and discuss, our own stories, our own heartaches, and create action. So creating a buffer to allow for space and for us to be human, to ask the questions that we've always wanted to ask. It's difficult to be in a situation where you're learning about an issue and it's, you're like, oh, I don't feel like I know everything about this, so I feel like I can't engage in this conversation. But we're all not experts about this at the end of the day. And so this creates a judgment-free zone for women of all backgrounds to come together and learn about the facts, and ask the questions that they've always wanted to ask in community.
And how did you become such an activist? Like, how did you, where was that evolution?
It started when I was pregnant and I was facing a lot of pregnancy discrimination at work. And I always struggled because I think that as a woman of color and have, really kind of climbed the corporate ranks, you think that you would get to be more powerful, but you actually become disempowered. Working in the tech industry and the entertainment industry, which is very male dominated, you're often looked as I don't know, like a bitch, or if you speak your mind too much, you're angry. And I always really kind of struggled with this of, I'm thinking that if I was if I got to a corner office place and I would have the power to be able to speak my mind and speak for other people and call out injustice. And I felt very disempowered to do that. I think at the same time, the 2016 election was happening. And when that person, I don't like saying his name, became president, I felt awful, like so many people, around the world. And I was one of those people that were like, oh, okay, someone's doing the work that helps Hillary get elected. My contribution is voting for her. And I thought that was good enough. Clearly that was not good enough. And I felt a very deep responsibility in that. But when I tried to talk about it with other people, it was so difficult. You went on Facebook and it was like the Hunger Games. You found out that, your uncle was actually racist, or, a childhood friend that you haven't spoken to in years was, writing all sorts of things about Muslims not being welcomed here. And it was heartbreaking to see. But I think amidst all of the Make America Great Again and the Hear Me Roaring, what was so profound was the silence in that. And it was the silence of so many women like me who didn't feel comfortable participating in a conversation, that knew what our values were, but didn't feel like there was a space, a safe space to talk about it. So I called up a girlfriend of mine, Chelsea, and who's the co-founder of I Will Not Be Quiet. And I was expressing my frustration, and I was like, can we just bring some people around a table to talk about this? I'm surely not the only person thinking about this. And she, like many other women in great movements, said, I'll help you, let's do it. So we sent out an email, and within a week we had 14 women who did not know each other in my very small living room in Park Slope, talking about what was going on. And it ended up being like a bitch fest on the State of the Union, but it also became a beautiful space where we saw the power of storytelling and the power of coming together and the power of our own vulnerabilities in a space. So we wanted to build on that, and we've just been growing since then.
Mm. So besides being a space to share, what else do you do in terms of activism?
So aside from our talking circles, which is kind of where all the magic happens, we do other activations. Like we have held rallies before, one specifically in Washington Square Park around the Kavanaugh hearings. We've done text banking, we've done phone banking, and we've knocked on doors. The whole point of this is to take what we learn in these living room conversations out into the open world. Activism lives and breathes in the sunlight, but it starts within a small group of people. It's how our greatest movements have been activated, from the civil rights movement to the women's suffrage movement. What starts in a living room can end in Congress. And so what we really try to cultivate at I Will Not Be Quiet is the power of community, the power of having those in-person conversations. While it's so important to have social media to amplify that message in a very quick way, we've almost forgotten the beauty of sitting around in a circle and talking to people face to face. And understanding that is where empathy really comes from. So our activations have varied quite a bit, but what we really try to kind of focus on are those talking circles, and bringing different advocates into our circle to learn about the issues at hand.
Mm-hmm. So I loved what you said, that this all starts within, right? Like you have to do the work within, and then start a little circle and share and be vulnerable with women or men around you. And, you know, I've participated in marches before, like the Women's March. But like, at what point do you actually need to reach out to a senator or a governor or a mayor? Like, what part of this actually is necessary to make actual change?
Well, I think that part of it is making activism an everyday lifestyle. And understanding our own role in democracy and not taking that for granted. We often forget that so much of what we're connected to in the world has to do with government, and has to do with from the food that we eat and the safety of it to how our transportation system runs, and we take these things for granted. And so I think a lot of that has to do with understanding that all of this is a privilege, and understanding that this can be very easily taken away from us. And so making sure that you do have you do know who your representative is, and you do know how to contact them, which surprisingly, until the past I would say 18 months, people didn't know really how to do, because that information was not readily available to them. I know for sure that 3 years ago, I had no idea how to contact my senator. And so I think that's really the importance of storytelling here, and the importance of us sharing that out, this information out, and the importance of the media to own that narrative, so that we understand what needs to happen in order for us to build the world that we want to live in. But it takes those small and meaningful actions to really make a difference and really become part of our habitual lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's what a lot of people now are feeling. They feel a little disenfranchised about the government, and to be quite honest with you, I don't trust the government right now. I don't think it's in our best interest. The leaders who are in there are not looking out for our best interest.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just trying to be very mindful of who I listen to and who I take seriously, which amazingly our governor is I feel like he has been this calm in the storm. Governor Cuomo. But what do you say to people who are maybe not as active and who want to be active? What is the first step?
Yeah. So I have some thoughts on this. So I think that it would be an ideal world if our government, um, across all levels, local, state, federal, um, really served our best interests at hand, um, especially those who are marginalized. Because if they do that, if they have a laser focus in that, it truly does move us all forward. Um, what I what I try to talk to people about when they say like, what's going to happen, what's going to happen 2020, what's going to happen in November, almost it's like you're watching a movie, um, except this isn't a movie. That we have the power as everyday citizens to take action, and it doesn't always we don't always have to bring in um, government leaders or lean on government leaders for change. It always starts with our closest circles and our communities.
Mm-hmm.
So what I often tell people when they ask, what can I do? It's I often ask them, like, what is speaking to you right now? What are the issues that is really, tugging at your heartstrings, and helping them understand that, or how to identify, what path they should take. I think that in this news cycle, and I think in general, like it's very hard to figure out where you should devote your attention to. It's like,
Yeah, totally.
yeah, there's conversations about ICE. It's like the, families being separated at the border. It's a gender wage gap. It's so many different things. Um, so you are not going to be effective if you spread yourself way too thin. So I try to encourage people to like think long and hard, journal about it, like meditate on it. Like, what is the one thing that is really tugging at your heartstrings, and identify that and focus your energy in that. If it is something like that, are really focused on, um, helping women get paid, at a more fair level than, what men are getting paid at. What skill sets can you provide that can help drive that further? How can you speak up at work or encourage other women within your community, to take in specific tactics that can help negotiate a specific salary? So whatever it might be, really kind of making sure that you focus in on that, because this fight is long and this fight is hard, and we need to make sure that it's an issue that we want to wake up every single day fighting for, because it will break your heart and it won't always be rosy. So it has to be personal, it has to come from a very deep place.
Yeah.
I also kind of let them know that, it is these small actions that can make a big difference. So kind of taking in to see, like, what is that one thing that I can do this week? What is that one thing that I can do this month? For me, an issue that I'm really focused on is, how can I put women of color in the spotlight and support where they need to go and the positions that they were meant to take on, and the spaces that they thrive in. And so what I do is that, every month I have a list of 5 women, in my notebook, where I kind of like pinpoint, like, what is like that one thing that I want to do to help support them, whether it's going to connect them to someone that I know, whether it's going to be like leaving them a Google review on their small business page, whatever it might be. And I try to keep that as a monthly practice for myself. And that makes it seem more, possible to me, that, the world can be, more equitable. But it's all about thinking, what can I personally do within my community that helps us move all forward.
Hmm. I love so many of the things that you just said. You said, first of all, focus on what's important to you. And you're right, like there's so many issues that I'm so passionate about, that I'm like, which one do I pick? And I love what you said about picking 5 women. I'm the same way. I try to raise the voices of women of color as well. And I try to help them through this podcast and my platform. So those are like very easy things to do. Because I'm like, this whole thing and this whole situation has made me more passionate about healthcare.
Mm.
I'm like, okay, I think I need to focus on that. So thank you for those tips.
Yeah, I think it's incredible that are focusing your efforts in this way. And it's really like, it's almost like having this filter, as you're looking at, different things in your life and the decisions that you make, and ensuring that the issue that is meaningful to you, is in the forefront of that, whatever that might be. And I think ensuring that we're narrowing our focus that way just makes everything more digestible. And as you see certain change happens, it kind of builds up your confidence of what could be possible.
I'm just taking notes. That's what I remember. So can we talk about politics for a little bit?
Yeah.
I love talking about this. So, okay, where do I even start with this question? We went from such a robust, dynamic group of candidates that were diverse, there were women, and then we ended up with the same thing. And listen, I love Bernie and I love Uncle Joe, but what the heck? So do you mind sharing who you were rooting for, who you were like backing up, and then your thoughts on all that?
I was and am a hardcore Warren fan. I loved everything about her and the issues that she was supporting and how she thought about things. I loved how she was a teacher.
Yeah.
And so being a teacher, you have this relationship with listening and understanding and empathy. And I felt gutted that she lost.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, what I have been trying to kind of push forward in my mind is that just because a political candidate that you are rooting for doesn't make it to the forefront, should not be the reason why you take a step back.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Warren getting as far as she did pave the way for the next future female president and future female vice president. The arc of progress is long and curved, and I think that we have to remind ourselves that there's no, it would be narrow-sighted to think that the end goal is going to be happening anytime soon.
Yeah.
That that there's ebbs and flows for all of this, and so I'm okay with Bernie and Joe. Ultimately at the end of the day, I'm going to vote for the Democratic candidate, but there is something that is comfortable for a lot of America to focus on white older men, and I had hoped that we were further along in that, especially with what has happened within the past couple of years with the number of women who showed up to the Women's March in 2017 after the election, the Me Too movement, all of the subconscious and conscious things that have come out into the world. But I'm hopeful. I'm trying to stay grounded in love and just make sure that we're doubling down on the issues that we care about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear you, sister. I was super disappointed.
Yeah, it was a devastating blow. Like it almost it felt like when, I mean, not as much as when like Hillary lost, but there was just so much hope around it, going from such a broad and diverse ticket and feeling so hopeful about it, to going back to where we were. And but I think that as I take a step back and I look at all of this, I even ask myself, like, did I do everything that I could have done?
Yeah.
And it just makes me want to push harder.
I asked myself the same thing, especially after Hillary. I was like, I didn't, because when Obama was on the ticket, I traveled to Philadelphia every weekend for I think a couple months to do work for his campaign. And for Hillary, I didn't do anything. I just thought she had it in the bag, and I was like, oh, she's just gonna get elected. And I was like, oh, I didn't do anything. It was like, I take responsibility for that. And I think even now, I donated to a couple of the candidates, but I was like, did I do enough?
Yeah, it's a hard thing because we ask ourselves that question, but it's like, we did what we could do in the season of life that we were in at that time. And to acknowledge and embrace that, at the same time making sure that we're reminding ourselves of like where we need to go from here and the work that continues to be done. I think for me, like, what I've been thinking about is, what exactly could I have done that, I could have done more of. And, whether that is like having more in-person conversations or talking about her issues a bit more. But, I think we have to be a little bit kind to ourselves too, because we can't do everything, and we can do what we can in the season of life that we're in.
Yeah. So this might not have like an answer to my question, but I think that, we live in New York. We live in a pretty liberal state. It always votes blue, and so do the coastal cities. But what is your advice for somebody who wants to have that conversation with somebody who thinks differently than us, that, like, you want to have that dialogue with somebody. You don't want to just like shut off altogether. Do you have any tips to, talk to somebody that has different views than you do?
Yeah, I think that, and I mentioned this to you, when we chatted a little bit before our call, is that, we have deeply held subconscious and conscious things that are deep in our culture, that we have to unearth and undo. And it isn't until we have the conversations with people that we have the self-awareness and that really actually comes out. And so I advise people to kind of proceed with care and caution and expectation that it 99% of the time will not go the way that you think that it's going to go, but to proceed with the act of listening. And so rather than saying, why don't you feel this and this and this, saying, why do you feel this? And really kind of understanding, what is the story behind that? There are a number of myths, truths, and false narratives that so many people have been telling themselves for so long, to answer, why they haven't been able to get ahead in life.
Yeah.
It is the same engine of a very well-oiled machine of false narratives that have been shared to predominantly white Americans and privileged Americans on why they haven't been able to get ahead. And a lot of it has to do with a media narrative that kind of popularizes Black crime and de-emphasizes white crime. And so you have to really kind of think about that a lot of this has been socialized for so long. And so when you're entering these conversations with people, and this is something that I really try to kind of flex in my own life, is
Mhm.
really kind of understanding the pain that's there, and what is the story behind the story and the story. So what is behind what they've been told and socialized their entire life, and what is the actual pain that's feeding into it. And I think that the more that we can focus on that personal narrative, the more we can kind of open up
Mhm.
and kind of understand each other, and help kind of see each other's point of view. It's
Yeah.
easier said than done, as you know, definitely. They definitely want to call that out. But I think approaching these conversations with the expectation that you're just there to listen and
Mhm.
nothing else,
Mhm.
and that you don't have any expectations of how this is going to go, is really the first step.
Yeah.
Um, but kind of, again, it's like proceeding with caution and knowing that you're going into this um, with a full heart and with love and compassion, as opposed to you're trying to uh, kind of push your own values and your own opinions, into their space. Everybody has a different experience, a totally different lived experience from each other, and so I think we have to understand that.
Right. Well, what you said about the subconscious programming is actually the answer I came up with. And when I found out that Marianne Williamson was running, I was like, okay, I totally get her. I don't think America's ready. And then I read Andrew Yang's book.
Mm,
I don't know if you've read it.
I
It's
haven't.
so good. You have to read it. I forget the name of it. It's the one that he just wrote about like why we should all have universal income.
Hmm.
But he talks about how it's really the mindset of the people of the United States, and how if you went to college, if you graduated from college and you have two parents, you're actually the 1% of the world. And he isn't even talking about us. He's talking about the middle of the country where people don't have college educations and they have these very, very blue collar jobs, and their mindset is of scarcity. It's like a mindset.
Hmm.
And they just live in a totally different United States than we do. We both, I'm assuming you graduated from college.
Mhm.
We live in a very wealthy state. We live in a very wealthy country, and we don't even live in the same like income bracket. So he's really talking about these Americans that feel left behind, that technology is taking over their jobs, and it really is a mindset of scarcity and that they're feeling left behind. So I think it
Mhm.
really is, a subconscious mindset programming, and then their beliefs are affirmed by the news that they watch, like you said, and the fear of the other and fear of people taking their jobs. And I mean, I don't have a solution for it, but I think it just opened up my eyes reading him.
Yeah. I've had these conversations about about how Trump won and why, and really kind of talking about how he was able to 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 really resonate with certain people who live their life in fear,
Yeah.
by meeting that narrative with another fear narrative, and really kind of explaining to them in a specific way as to why they were feeling
Mhm.
the way that they have been, really validating that, which for many people, like, nobody has really validated that for them. They've just been living with this.
Mhm.
um, so it's it's a clever tactic, but one that I think that we can all use to our positive advantage,
Mhm.
on how do we talk to people on their same wavelength, um, as opposed to meeting it with fear, meeting it with love, and trying to understand, like, what is that story that they have, what is that story that we all have, that we can connect with. There is a universal truth in all of this, um, but I think it starts with creating the space to talk to people, and meet them eye to eye.
Yeah.
um, I don't think I will ever compare Trump's tactics to something that we should learn from. But it is something that that I do think about, that I do think is interesting, and is a reason why he was really able to kind of shift that specific part of the country.
Yeah. What are your spiritual practices that have kept you aligned and kept you calm, or anything you want to share? It doesn't have to be spiritual either.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I think about, one of the things that I mentioned last night in our meditation session is that, a lot of people don't realize that I'm actually a very shy person,
Mhm.
and that it takes a lot of energy for me to do the work that I do. A lot of the work that I do, it involves being out there and organizing and talking to different people. And so I what has worked well for me, which is also something that I continue to struggle with and um, continue to try to find ways to improve on, is asking for support for that quiet time.
Mhm.
So being able to say, I need 10 minutes to just to have that quiet time for myself. Whether I am just sitting there enjoying my lunch without anything around me, um, no noise around me, no nothing, or just having some certain time to myself. And I think that it's gotten more tricky, especially since I've become a mother. My daughter's only 2.5 right now, and is very talkative. Um, so it's become more challenging as I've entered that phase of my life, or that chapter of my life. But it's something that I feel like has helped me to stay grounded in the work that I do, knowing that that is who I am, and that's what I need in order to run and serve other people.
Mhm. Perfect. I love that practice. Before I forget, I did have a question. You said not on this call, but before, that your job is to kind of like filter out news and like what we should, I guess, watch. What is your advice for us as like the regular person who's not as savvy as you are to filter all the noise and all the data and all the news?
Yeah. So I go to two sources really for news. Um, I never just Google like a straight up issue, or or just follow like my Twitter feed. Um, I go to the New York Times for local coverage and national coverage. I get their newsletter every single morning. And then I also get Katie Couric's newsletter. I love her newsletter. Um, she's able to kind of really balance it with like what's happening in politics, what's happening around the world, and also with just some feel good content,
Mhm.
of things to kind of brighten up your day. And I have found like focusing on two specific sources for information has helped me kind of filter out what's out there and really kind of just go straight to the facts and the sources and the experts that are stating this. And so I would encourage that for the everyday person, is especially with there's so many different news outlets out there, and there's so many different types of fake news, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So it's going to like very specific handful of sources that that you can trust, that has a good balance of what's happening within your local community while giving a broader scape of what's happening around the world. That's what I would really focus on. I love Twitter and social media to get other random news, but I try so much to turn that off. Um, I feel like it just attracts the type of anxiety that you're searching for,
Mhm.
when you're on different platforms. So make a choice to just, close that door, or just manage how much time you're spending on those platforms.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say personally that I really, really admire what you're doing, and I honor you so much because, as I said when we first started chatting, um, like as a spiritual person, as a spiritual New Yorker, I I feel so deeply that activism is a spiritual act. Like, you can't just sit on your mat, you can't just meditate. You actually need to go out there in the world and take action to do something to make this world a better place. So thank you so much for having these platforms. If somebody wanted to join I Will Not Be Quiet, is it possible, or is it by invitation only?
Yeah, they definitely can. I think the best way would be to go on our Instagram page
Mhm.
at I Will Not Be Quiet and just DM us, and we'll add your email to our distribution list. And so we post all of our gatherings, now virtual gatherings, on Instagram, and we also have an email list. So looking forward to getting some new people in. We host our gatherings. We really only keep it to like up to 10 people at a time to have, to kind of nurture that authentic conversation and help people feel comfortable asking questions. So it's definitely a very safe space. And, I think that we all have a huge role to play to propel people into action, and it can be such a strong antidote to the type of energy that we're feeling around the world. So these types of community spaces can be so special for that.
Yeah. Well, is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wanted to share?
Hang in there. That's all. Take it one day at a time, people. Um, the world will come back around. I know that we're all feeling this on so many different levels, but um, I just want to say that if you are feeling alone, reach out to someone you love. This is the time to stay connected with people, and I look forward to that very beautiful day that we can kind of step out of our homes and give that first person our first hug in a very long time. So hang in there.
Well, this podcast is about awakening and aligning to your purpose, which it sounds like you have, and living your dream life. But after all this is done and we get to go back outside, what is your vision of your dream life? Like the Utopia Dream?
The Utopia Dream. Oh man, it is going to be
A woman president?
it is going to be a it's going to be equal representation across all levels of government. Um, there are over 500,000 spots, offices in our country, and only a fraction are held by women. And we wonder why our rights are not fully represented across local, state, and federal. And the more that we can have a government that looks like the population that it serves, the more we can all move forward and live the utopia life that we want. So, what I hope to see at that time is to see more women who look like me, who look more like my neighbor, and can bring the concerns for everybody to the forefront.
Awesome. I like that dream. And it's 2020. This is the year.
It is the year. It is the year. I think we're all kind of like focusing on like our self-care at this time, but I would say that like winning is sometimes the best form of self-care. So I'm looking forward to winning in November 2020. So that's where my energy's at.
Well, I'll include all your links in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time and your service. I honor you, sister. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oops.